I've got to say it's one of the very strangest packages that have been delivered to the Globe in the 20 years that I've been working here.
It was being delivered to no one in particular, it just said to the Boston Globe. So that, piqued my interest right there.
I was called down to our post office to take a look at this very strange package that has come in, wrapped in plain brown paper, with a return address in Medford, and the name on the return address is simply the word Veritas, truth in Latin.
So came over to the scanner, placed it in here.
Inside this box are human remains, with a cover letter from this person going by the name Veritas, and it begins, "This is not a Halloween prank."
We looked at each other like, is this for real or what?
It all started with a Memorial Day fishing trip. 4 young people, 2 men, 2 women, set out from Worcester early in the morning and went straight to the Plymouth town wharf and took outboard motor boat out for a day of fishing on a beautiful spring day. 2 of the people were dating, Danny Kwiatkowski and Jana Coonan, who was a teenager. And then Danny's sister, Elaine, was on the boat ride as well, and she was on what appears to be a first date with a man named Danny Poirier, who's another 25-year-old man. So they go out, and that's the last that is ever heard from them.
So then we get a call, and it's my father from Florida saying that he got a call from, I don't know if it was a Coast Guard or police or what, that they found a boat.
And the Coast Guard is called in to investigate. They find the fishing lines are baited. The boat itself isn't damaged. The boat was 6 miles off the coast when it was found, but it may have been closer when it flipped over. Some people thought maybe they could have swam to shore. All 4 of these people were young and strong and very capable swimmers. The anchor line was severed cleanly. It didn't look like it had been frayed or torn. It looked like a knife had cut straight through it. So what happened here? What are we looking at? Was this an abduction scene?
There was a lot of spooky stuff going on around that time in the Cape area.
I know.
That's why that brought up more questions about, you know, being drug-related and everything.
But they weren't convinced that this was the site of their death. The Coast Guard searched like crazy, and the family members did, of course, as well. And so the agony for these families, 3 different families, began and continued for years to come from that terrible day.
There was information inside of the package.
And he goes on to explain, I'm a doctor, and these bones have been in my possession for more than 30 years. They were given to me by somebody from the state crime lab because he'd been instructed to destroy them.
It's because they weren't particularly murders, but they were unsolved. And the murders are the only cases that the state keeps the evidence forever.
John McHugh, who ran the state crime lab, was given the task of throwing away these bones, and it pained him.
My father had some trust in science, and he felt that as science developed, they'd be able to positively identify this.
So he packed them up and gave them to this person, Veritas, whose identity I still don't know who it is.
He mentioned it a little bit to me. He never identified who this person was. I may have asked him, but I definitely recall that he didn't want me to know, per se.
Jana Coonan was the youngest of the 4 kids on the boat. Her dad was supposedly looking out for her, but he was down in Florida, and she was actually in Massachusetts with her boyfriend, Danny Kwiatkowski. When she disappeared, Paul Coonan was devastated, as any parent would be, but even more so because he felt like he hadn't been as good a steward of his young daughter as he should have been. And so he was carrying an extra heavy heart.
He would do all sorts of different searches talking to people.
He began writing the letters to Senator Kennedy and going to Coast Guard stations and knocking on doors. Meanwhile, Danny Kwiatkowski's mom, Marge, she also was devoting everything that she had to this effort. And so Marge is carrying on her search for the Kwiatkowski brother and sister, and Paul Coonan is carrying on his search for Jana.
The best thing that came out of this were Paul and Marge Coonan falling in love.
And I think they kind of like were falling in love like
Immediately.
a few months after the fact.
He breathed this constantly, and she supported him every step of the way because they couldn't understand why this could happen to them and why their children were gone.
And they got married, and they stayed together for the rest of their lives, always hoping to find their kids, always believing in some part of their heart they might find their kids, and dying not knowing what became of them. We turned the remains over to the Boston police, who in turn gave them to the state police. There weren't that many unaccounted for bodies that could have been in the ocean. So they actually had a suspicion that this skull could be one of the people who were lost on that boat. And they connected with the Kwiatkowskis and with the Coonans and the Poiriers. And they got DNA samples from them and tested it against the DNA found in the skull that was in the box that was sent to us.
I got the call back from the state trooper telling me that there was a match. You know, once you get the information, it just kind of, it stuns you a little bit. Because you still kind of expect to see somebody just walking on the street and it's your sister or something.
The remains in that box belonged to Jana Coonan, who'd been missing since 1976.
It's closure that I know that finally know that she has died and she's somewhat at peace. But still not knowing exactly what might have happened and things you probably will never definitively know.
The state police and the Boston Globe really wanted to know who Veritas is. The family of the Coonans, they actually feel a sense of indebtedness to Veritas and would like to thank him. The state police in their investigation were able to figure out which post office, at what time the package was mailed. We went to the return address. It's a condo building in Medford, not too far from Tufts University. It ended up being kind of a dead end. It was something that baffled all of us. Bear in mind that there's just a possibility that there are other human remains in this person's possession, and maybe there are more brown boxes to come.